Hi everybody, my name's Tom Goldsmith. I work here as the Captive Wildlife Care Coordinator, and this is Delaney. Delaney is our Captive Wildlife Care Specialist, which means she does most of the work, I do most of the writing. Anyways, today we have Casper. We're going to be doing a bit of a virtual birds of prey show. It's been a while since we've done a bird of prey show because of the COVID situation, but our birds still all want to come out. We work here every day. We make sure everybody's taken care of. They fly, they eat, they have their baths, everything else. And yes, birds of prey have baths all the time. We are going to talk about birds of prey today. We're going to probably see 2 or 3, but I want you to understand that there's a better word for birds of prey. Birds of prey, if you think about it, any bird that eats prey, so like a robin that jumps along your front lawn and picks up a worm, that's technically a bird of prey. A kingfisher that jumps off a branch over a creek and catches a little trout or a little minnow, that's also a bird of prey. What we're speaking of today is technically called raptors, basically like the Toronto Raptors. And what that means is they use their feet to catch their food. So any bird that uses its feet to catch its food is a raptor. So that's a good question. If I had everybody here, that would be one of my skill testing questions I ask to see if you guys remember what raptor means. But raptor means to catch with your feet. So a turkey vulture who we have over here, he loves to eat meat, but he doesn't catch anything. He never has to catch his food because he only eats dead things. So he is technically not a raptor because he's not catching them with his feet. But all the other eagles, hawks, owls, what else? Falcons. They're all using their feet to catch their food, so they are technically raptors. We're going to start today by talking about one of the most loved kinds of raptors, and that's owls. This here is Casper. He is how old?
13-year-old bird. His birthday was a few days ago, so he's 13 years old now.
He's 13-year-old barn owl. Now, barn owls in this part of Ontario, central Ontario, around Midland, Penetang area, barn owls are considered a species at risk. As a species at risk, that means that there are not very many around here. In fact, the only place that you're going to find barn owls in the province of Ontario is right down south, down to Windsor area. Really far south in the province of Ontario, you can still find a few of these. And that's not really our fault. The truth of it is these guys don't like the cold. If it gets below minus 15, these guys struggle a lot. If you notice, he's got nice bare legs. In the wintertime, that's going to get very cold for him. So at the marsh here, we keep Casper inside, where in the wintertime, he is never worrying about being too cold. We keep it heated in there for him, so he's nice and comfortable. He's telling me that he wants to get flying, so we're going to do that in just a second. But one of the things that makes owls, there's 3 things that we're going to talk about today. One is, if you look at his toes, he can have 3 toes in front and 1 in the back, or he can move around so he can put 2 in the front and 2 in the back. Makes it easier to grab his food. Owls are the only ones who have that, and ospreys. However, there's another thing that makes an owl, and that is that big facial disc you see on him. Owls have a huge facial disc because owls, honestly, don't see all that well close up. They find their food by sound in most cases. So what he's doing with that big circle face is he's gathering all the sound that comes into his gigantic ears. If I had an ear as big as him, it would go from the top of my head to the bottom of my jaw. He uses these big ears to figure out where his prey is, and he can go and catch him. Interesting fact about owls, they don't even need to see a mouse to catch it. That's why in the wintertime when you go along, sometimes you'll see the snow all laid out, and there'll be the marks of wings in the snow and a little punch in the middle. And what that is an owl has sat in a tree, heard a mouse under the snow. He doesn't have to see it. He can pounce down and grab that mouse without ever actually seeing it. So that's really cool about owls, and it's very characteristic of owls. The last thing about owls, and this is where we're going to turn them loose to let them fly, is owls are not fast, they're not particularly strong, but what they are is quiet. Listen carefully, it's very hard to hear an owl, and that's because they surprise their food. They basically fly over or sit and listen until they find where the food is. They can fly down and grab it as silent as a whisper. Very much like the way you would walk through your kitchen and grab a strawberry off the table. It doesn't even know it's coming. If he had to chase his food, he's probably going to miss it. Because if his prey would be things like mice and snakes and things like that, if they saw him coming, they'd probably get away because he's just not fast enough to catch him. But his silence is key. So turn him loose and we'll see how quiet he can go.
I didn't hear him. Hup, hup.
So one of the things that you might have noticed when he was flying around is, as we tried to point out, how quiet he is. And the reason he's quiet is because of his feathers. His feathers are super, super soft on the outside, so that when he moves through the air, he's got little fibers on those feathers that break up the wind. They're called flukes. That's the expert speaking. They actually cut through the wind so that there's no noise. When we bring one of our hawks out and fly him, you're going to hear his wings moving a lot more. He doesn't have the flukes the way an owl does. Also, Casper's kind of excited today because he's got a brand new set of feathers. In the course of a year, he will lose every feather on his body and replace it with a brand new one. That's nature's way of making sure that his feathers are always in good shape. So right now it's summertime, time when there's lots of food around for him, so he's going to lose his feathers and get new ones. He'll always be able to fly because he only loses them one at a time. So he'll lose this one, and then this one, and then when these start growing back, he'll get another one, and he'll keep getting his feathers back as they come, so that he's never considered flightless. He will basically get all brand new feathers. He's almost done now. He's got a couple more in his back that he has to replace, but basically all his feathers are in, and he is ready to go for flying.
There's one right there that's actually halfway.
Has he got a feather halfway?
Yep, right there.
Yep.
So there's his actual tail right there, and one halfway down.
Yep. So he's still growing some of them, but he's pretty much ready to fly. So we're going to let him fly around a little bit more because that's what we do. We try and make sure that all the birds here get out and fly and enjoy the weather, enjoy the ability to fly, and that's important. Also important to know, the reason these birds are flying to us is because it's a reaction to food. Don't let anybody tell you that they love us. They don't. They're interested in their food. So when he comes back, we always, always, always fulfill our promise and give him a little bit of food. That way, if he flies off into the trees somewhere and we need him back and we call him, he knows that there's food in our hand. We've never lied to him. We only ever call him when we've got food. So Delaney's going to let him go back to his perch, and he's going to come back for food. We were speaking about feathers and how he replaces his feathers every year and how owls can be very silent in their flying. This is one of Casper's feathers. If you look real carefully, you can see those little tiny hairs that stick off the edge of an owl's feather that are called flukes. These are what cuts through the air and makes it so quiet. It also slows him down, because when he's got that much dragging against the air, it makes him a little slower. A hawk does not have these things. They are much faster and they make a little bit more noise. But then again, they chase their food. Owls generally surprise their food. So this is one of Casper's feather that he gave us, and he gives us them every year when he changes them for new ones. If you can see, this one is starting to get a little worn on the end, and nature makes it so that when the feathers start getting worn out, he gets a brand new set every year. This is the next raptor we're going to show you. Raptor means, remember, he uses his feet to catch his food. He's got big talons on the end, just like an owl. But here's a Harris hawk. Now, a Harris hawk doesn't live in Ontario in the wild. They are basically from Texas, Arizona. Basically, they're a desert hawk. The interesting thing about Harris hawks is they're the only raptor that hunts collectively with his own kind. So he basically hunts in his family. All raptor species, owls, falcons, eagles, hawks, girls are always bigger than boys. So the big girls, when he's hunting, the big girls will go sit up in the trees, and the little boys will run around and try and get game out of the woods for them, whether it's a lizard in the desert or a rabbit or birds or whatever. And then the females are big enough that they can chase down a lot of the food, and when she catches it, just like a pack of wolves, they all share the same meal. So Harris hawks are very unique in that way. He is very social. He quite likes people. He quite likes working in a group. So when you can come to the marsh again, I invite you to come to the marsh and see him, because he loves to fly around with people. Today he's going to sit here and show us the ability of a hawk to use his eyes. We spoke about how an owl uses his ears to catch his prey or find his prey. A hawk uses his eyes. Delaney, how good are his eyes?
7 times better and 4 times faster.
Which means when we talk about fast, we mean if you watched a movie and you slowed it down into slow motion, that's how he's seeing things. So if a little squirrel, maybe 400 yards away, or maybe the size of a parking lot away, decides to wiggle his nose, wiggle his whiskers like mine, he's going to see that. he can see things slowly and extremely well. The only thing he can't see through is cover or walls or things like that. Hawks will basically fly around and get able to chase their species, whatever they're hunting. So Delaney's going to throw him up in the air, up in the perch here, and she's going to throw a piece of meat in the air to show you how he's faster than an owl, and he uses his eyes to catch his food. Let him go.
Hans. Hans, up!
Earlier we spoke a little bit about, where are you going there, buddy? He says he wants to go and fly, because that's how he gets food.
Yeah.
We spoke a little bit earlier about the talons and the feet of an owl being, what is it, Delaney?
Gyrodactyl.
Nice. Now we have a hawk here. This is Hans, he's a Harris hawk. We spoke about him a little bit earlier. If you look at his feet, he's got 3 talons in the front, and that one doesn't go any further back than that. They are interesting though, because if you notice his legs are quite long and bald. No feathers on his legs. That's one of the reasons he can handle the warm weather as well as he does. So these guys, because they're a desert hawk, they can do very well in the extreme heat, and he's got lots of adaptations to help him do that. One are these nice long bare legs. If you look at his face, he doesn't have any feathers in front of his eyes. So he's got a nice open face so he can keep a little bit cooler in the extreme heat. If Delaney can turn him around, if he doesn't jump, I knew you'd jump. We're going to look at one of the main features of a hawk different from an owl. This big beautiful tail. If you'll notice, he's got one feather a little shorter than the others, and that's because that one is just growing in because he's molted his old one out and he's getting new ones in. Now, his tail is much longer than his wings. Oftentimes, a bird with a longer tail implies that that bird flies in the thick forest. So some owls that are deep forest owls also have long tails, but hawks are very easy to notice that big long tail, so when they go through thick forest, they can shorten their wings up, tuck them in a little bit, and use that tail like a boat rudder to get through the trees. So it helps him chase his food by having a nice long tail, and it also helps him with his speed. So he can chase his food, whereas an owl is just going to surprise his food. Now, one of the really interesting things that hawks do, and they get this carried over from when they're babies, is they mantle. Now mantle is basically he creates an umbrella over his food. So in a minute here we're going to drop some food on the ground and Delaney's going to show you how he mantles over his food. But let me explain what it is. When he's in a nest with his baby brothers and sisters and his mom brings in one mouse, there's going to be fights. So what they do is they grab that mouse, one of them will grab that mouse, turn his back and mantle over it. When he mantles over it, they can't see it. And a hawk relies so much on its eyes, if they can't see it, it doesn't exist. So as soon as he hides it from his brothers and sisters with a mantle, they relax, they don't even know what he's got. He'll eat his supper with a piece and nobody will try and get it for him. It also helps him when he gets older. With a bird like this, if he goes out into the wilderness and he catches, say, a snake, and he's eating a snake and a red-tailed hawk or an eagle or something wants to come over and steal his food because he's got food, by mantling, he covers that food over. It keeps him safe because nobody knows what he's got under there. So if I'm an eagle flying over him right now, I can't see what he's got. So he's nice and safe with his food. And as I said, when he was in his nest with his brothers and sisters, that would have kept him nice and safe too, because they wouldn't be trying to get his supper. So when he finishes his supper, and there's nothing left to mantle about, he won't mantle. He'll just walk away from it. Now we've been filming a little bit here with Hans, and you might have noticed since when we began this filming process, he didn't have a lump in his chest. But now, he's got a little lump in his chest. And that is all the food that we've been feeding him. Hawks have a crop. Now owls don't have a crop, but hawks do. And a crop is basically like a pocket. Because he doesn't want anybody seeing his food, so he's going to eat it and put it away fast. So he sticks it in his little pocket. And then over the next few hours, he will digest that and that'll move through his system and into his tummy and everything else. But when he first gets it, he just wants to put it away. So he sticks it in this little pocket up here called the crop. And that is full of food now because he's been flying with us and he's received his food rewards. And so he's got a nice big crop. So if you ever see a bird and it looks like it's got a baseball or a golf ball stuck in his front, that's because he's just probably finished a mouse or something like that, and he's got a nice full crop. So now I've made a mess of his feathers. He says I'm going to have to go clean those. Hans, when we finish here today, we'll go have a bath immediately. All of our birds like to bathe. The reason they do that is because we've been talking a lot about feathers today. feathers are what keeps them alive. They need to have good, strong, healthy feathers. So they're constantly cleaning them, they're constantly having a bath, they're constantly taking care of their feathers because they seem to know that without good feathers, they're not going to be able to catch their food as well. Our next bird that we're going to show you today is one of the biggest raptors there is in North America. This is Zibby. Zibby is a bald eagle. Now if you're wondering to yourself, why doesn't she have a white head like a bald eagle does? She's getting there. It takes 5 years for them to get a white head. So her first year she was all brown. Then she started getting all kinds of flecks on her like you see on her back here. All these white flecks. And then she started getting white on her head, and then her body starts turning dark again and she's turning into a bald eagle. But as I said, it takes 5 years before they get that white head. She is a female, and as such, if you remember from earlier, we talked about how boys are always smaller than girls. So Zibby is about as big as they get. She's got wingspan that's over 4 feet. She is a very strong bird. These talons of hers can crush 420 pounds. So they would take a soup can and just crush it, no problem. So her feet are very, very strong, but they need to be because she catches big fish. She has a lot of strength in her wings so that if she gets a fish, she has to lift it out of the water, she can. But then one of the mistakes that people make and they think about eagles is they only eat fish. Eagles are very fast. Eagles can eat everything. They can catch rabbits, they can catch ducks, they can catch all kinds of food. They don't just eat fish. But like me, fish are easy to get, so they're going to go easy. I'm the same way. If I don't have to work too hard for it, I won't. Now Zibby came to us because she has an eye injury. This eye over here, she's blind. She's blind in her right eye. So she was found by fishermen and she was starving to death, and they couldn't figure out why because she's healthy in every way, except for the fact that she didn't have any meat on her. She was starving. Then they found out at the veterinarians that that eye, she can't see out of it. So she can't see her food enough to catch it. She can see it at a distance, but when she goes up close, she can't quite figure out where to grab. So Zibby has one good eye over here and one bad eye. And that's why she's here. At the Wye Marsh, we were not interested in keeping birds that are healthy and can live a wild life. A wild life is where these birds should absolutely be. The only birds we'll keep here are birds that can't live in the wild. So they come and teach us, and adults and children and school-killed children, about raptors. Again, the raptor, we can tell that she's a raptor because of these big old strong feet. When she's probably another year old, her head will turn snow white. Her beak will turn yellow. If you look, her beak is kind of turning yellow right now. Her tail will turn all white. So she'll have a yellow beak, white head, white tail, and nice yellow feet. That's when she's an adult. Right now she's a juvenile and she's getting there. So she's not going to fly for us today because she's taking a COVID time off. She'll be flying before the end of the summer here, but right now we're just letting her molt her feathers out. So this is Zibby, the bald eagle, female bald eagle, juvenile. She's here at the Wye Marsh, and I'm going to go stick her away, and we're going to bring out one more bird for you. This bird here is a broad-winged hawk. Now, her name is Willow, and she serves as a reminder of what we do here at the Wye Marsh. Willow was hit by a car, and because of it, she can't fly. But she's such a nice little bird, and she's a very common species to central Ontario. So basically, this is the kind of bird you see every summer as you drive around the roads of Simcoe County, sitting on wires or on branches. About this size, he's a little bit small. I mean, she is probably, maybe 20 inches, or how many centimeters? Maybe 30 centimeters long at the most. She is a migratory bird. Her specialty is catching things like mice and crayfish and frogs. So she lives in the deep forest. She catches these things. Now if you think about it, when winter comes, what happens to the frogs? They disappear. What happens to the crayfish? They disappear. Snakes, they disappear. So she runs out of food. So she's migratory, which means she can handle the cold, but there's no food for her. So she moves south, and it's spectacular. In September, if you look up in the sky against a nice white cloud, you'll see hundreds of birds circling around together. That's called a kettle of birds. And more than likely, it's a kettle of broad-winged hawks. They get together in big groups every fall and migrate south down to places like Florida, South America. They're basically moving out of here because their food is gone. They don't really go because it's too cold. They just go because his food's gone. Now Willow has, since she's been here with us, has grown herself a brand new tail. She didn't have much of one when she got here. And she is doing really well. She's still shading a few feathers, but she should be done soon. But if you notice her tiny little feet, unlike Hans or some of the other birds that have big feet for catching birds and big game, mostly she's catching mice and, as I was saying, crayfish and things like frogs and toads. Her feet don't need to be very big. They're nice and short. She can grab a hold of her food with them because she is a true raptor, and she doesn't need those big long feet. So because she can't fly, what we do here at the marsh with her is we let her try. We think that every bird should do the best that they can. So we basically give her an opportunity to come out and fly. We never put her in a dangerous situation, but we'll jump her from Delaney's hand to my hand so that she gets used to flying. I spoke earlier about how boys are smaller than girls when it comes to raptors. When Ernie first came to us, and his name was Ernie at the time, we thought it was a boy because he's a little fella. Wasn't very long after that Ernie showed us that's the wrong name. You know how he showed us? By laying an egg. This is Ernie's egg. She laid 3 of them. So we had to change her name to Willow. I think Willow's a better name for her anyways because she looks more like a bird that nests in the willow forest. So basically, this is her egg. She laid 3. There's nothing in this one because she doesn't have a boy around, so the eggs were just eggs, just like the ones you eat for breakfast, although I wouldn't be eating a broadwing hawk egg. This egg here, I put a little hole in it and I took all the water and everything out of it, and so now it's a perfect specimen of a broadwing hawk egg. And that's yours. You did that, didn't you? You did 3 times.